But he mentioned we have the birthday of the 11th Ṭipitaka Ācariya. They have a tradition in Myanmar, in Burma, that some monks learn the whole Ṭipitaka by heart. So it's an amazing feature of memory. But the examination includes not only knowing the whole Ṭipitaka by heart, but also understanding the meaning, and basically they also have to learn all the commentaries and so on, and that is also checked in the examination. So there's only a limited number of monks who have that ability. And when we arrived here and we started Dhammagiri in 2007, we only had the top property. This was owned by a layperson, ex-army man, and he lived here with his partner. And we only had this road going up the hill, and then on top and beyond the hill going down again. And then we realized how difficult it will be to do everything on top, to build there, and also to get the excuse me. to get the parking sorted. Now, how do you have a big car park on top there, and so on? And how do you get the cars up the steep road? And just when we realized how difficult that is, the guy here suddenly had the idea that he would like to travel in a boat around Australia together with his partner. And he wanted to sail and get the money for the property, buy a boat, and then just go traveling on a boat. And Dr. Ramini used to work on the fence line, planting little plants that he's less disturbed when the cars are going up for our programs. So they started chanting, and he indicated that he's happy to sail and he would do it even without an agent, which saves you some money. And then we started off on that, and then we had a fundraiser. It was September 2008. Can you remember what happened in September 2008? The Lehman Brothers and global financial crisis, the big crash. As Bear Stearns in Wall Street, and then Lehman Brothers crashed and the global financial crisis started. So our fundraiser, and he wanted 850K in the beginning, and our fundraiser didn't really go anywhere because everyone was so worried and many people lost huge amounts of their savings and so on. And then at some stage later, because we couldn't buy it, he actually signed a contract for some guys who wanted to put cross-country motorbikes onto this property. Would have been a total nightmare. This is a monastery, and here he has got a little training course for cross-country motorbikes. And he had signed the contract. But then very fortunately, also because of the global financial crisis, these guys couldn't get the finance. The finance fell through, and then the whole thing didn't happen. And then over time, in 2009, we started now our fundraising. And in the end, he also came down with the price. He realized he couldn't ask for the same price anymore. And we were fundraising, and then we making an offer and pushing as far as we can. And from all the funds we could somehow generate. And then the negotiations came, and then actually one person who I had recommended to leave it to the people he had most trust with, but then one person unfortunately involved himself, and then he got shy. The vendor got shy, and then he backed out. And it was only about 15,000 separating us, 15 or 20K. But we just couldn't pay more, and he wasn't willing to go any further down. And so it just didn't go ahead. And in that situation, T brought this Ṭipitaka Ācariya to visit Dhammagiri, just to have a look. We were on top in this big marquee tent. And when he came, it was actually just in the morning, 8 o'clock or something, and we invited him into the marquee tent. And as he can chant, as he knows by heart anything, any sutta from the whole Tipitaka, I thought maybe I can ask him to chant the Mahāsamaya. And that's a fairly famous one anyhow, and he could chant anything. And so he agreed on that. And do you all know the Mahāsamaya? There's a famous sutta, and that was when all the Devas from 10 world systems, or at least most of them, they would come together and celebrate the Buddha. The Buddha was near Kapilavatthu in the Mahavana, the big forest that stretched through the whole Himalayas with 500 monks. But the main thing is in every lifetime of a Buddha, there's one occasion where all the Devas gather and they kind of rejoice and celebrate that Tathagata has appeared in the world, and they come together and the Buddha gives teachings. This is only the introduction. That sutta is that the Buddha explains to the monks all the different devas who have come. Because some monks with psychic powers, and I can see them, some monks with weaker psychic powers can see only some of them, and some monks without psychic powers and can't see the devas in spirit at all. So the Buddha goes starting from the lowest level, Bhuma Deva and Yakas, Nagas, Gandhabas, Kumbhandas, Garudas, and so on, and up to the highest Brahmalokas. And he explains who has come with their names. Most of the suttas is just a list of all kinds of names. But for spirits, you may know that it's actually very powerful, knowing the name of a spirit. And they're also using that in magic and so on. But here the Buddha completely wholesome and pure, and just explaining the devas who came to celebrate. And because the lifespan in the deva world is really long, so virtually all of these devas and spirits are still alive even now, because lifespan is so much longer. And for most of them it's not even that long ago. So generally when someone chants that sutta, the reputation is that the devas really love it, they really like it, and they come and rejoice. It's a little bit like your top party you have been, and then you meet with your old friends and you talk about this super party event and how fantastic it was. It's a bit like that. They remember and rejoice in that huge event when all the devas came together, and then later the Buddha was teaching. So whenever you chant the Mahāsamaya Sutta, you may attract quite a few devas. It's considered super auspicious. We have a version on our podcast from Ajahn Dhammasiha. Used to be the second most popular of our uploads. First the most popular, and by now the morning chanting and precepts is the most popular, about which I'm quite happy. So if you go on any of the podcast apps, you put Dhammagiri Mahāsamaya, you will see it. You can listen to Ajahn Dhammasiha chanting that quite beautifully. But before this famous Ṭipitaka Ācariya started chanting, I asked him and I said, you see, we have this problem, we really want this property for the welfare and benefit of the sasana, and that the lay community can easily park, and we have a nice proper building, a lay community can come together, listen to Dhamma. And it would be beautiful if the Devas could maybe help a little bit. We are only some 15,000 apart from the vendor. We just can't generate more funds for a kind of cash payment or immediate payment. And hopefully the Devas can sort something. And he said, yeah, fine. And he did his chanting. I basically didn't understand a word because Myanmar style is quite different. It's difficult to understand if you're not used to that chanting style. But very accurately we all listened. And I always had great faith in the power of the Mahāsamaya Sutta and the Devas. But even I didn't know that it would actually work within 1 hour. And 1 hour after the chanting, Terry, that was the name, I think Terry, who lived here, he called Dr. Garmini and said that he is happy to sell at our offering price. An hour, literally an hour after the chanting. And later, after it was all settled and done and so on, I actually spoke to him and asked him, how did you change your mind? And he said, no, I was just driving my partner to her hair salon. She's a hairdresser. And I was driving her and we were stuck in the traffic jam. And I was just thinking, why am I doing that? Why don't I get onto this boat and get out of it all? And then he just spontaneously decided, I just call Dr. Garmini and take the offer. It was very impressive. So today is the birthday of that Acharya.
Given all the reason as to why he wanted to sell his property and move on to a boat.
Uh-huh.
He said that he had to move so many acres of grass here. If he moves into the boat, he doesn't have to mow any grass at all.
Uh-huh, yeah. He also got sick and tired of the mowing. There's a lot of mowing here. But we now have the horses to support us in that. He hadn't thought of that. Because the neighbors on that side, in this direction, they have therapy horses. It's actually very therapeutic for teenagers who are in trouble, sometimes mental illness, sometimes issues with aggressive behavior and so on. This can be very helpful for them interacting with horses. I also find it therapeutic, sometimes giving some carrots to the horses. You feel relaxed and happy. Vassa is a good time to do things like that. Have you ever chanted the Mahāsamaya Sutta? There's in Dīgha Nikāya. Mahavagga. I tell you the opposite. If it's very powerful, I would recommend you to chant it. No, I can't see any problem with that one. There's another one which is the Artanatiya, where you call all the names of all these powerful yakas and the kind of police yakas and military general yakas. And that is generally recommended to be used only if you have exhausted all other options. Because it was specially given if any ghosts or yakas are seizing monks and get really troublesome. It's a little bit really like dialing 000, Artanatiya Parita. Is also in Dīgha Nikāya. But that is really like dialing 000 and calling the police or calling the SWAT team. You don't want to do that now if the neighbors have the music a little bit loud. You want to call the SWAT team on them or the military. But with the Mahāsamaya, I once met a monk who does hardly anything else, a Myanmar monk. And he would travel around and basically his practice is just chanting the Mahāsamaya Sutta wherever he goes and all the time. I don't think that you can do much harm there. And I know it will generate very positive energy. And you can learn to chant it by listening and then joining in. You can even learn it by heart. Now that's a tough one. Ajahn Dhammasiha learned it by heart. It's not easy because there's all these names. But these are things, if you want to enhance your practice during the Vassa, during the rains retreat. Getting a sutta you find inspiring, and that would be one. Another one is the Dhamma which we did last time. maybe the most famous discourse of all. The successor of my Upacharya, one of my chanting acharyas for the ordination, the Venerable Arya Dhamma, he has passed away as well now. But he had the practice now of chanting the Dhammacakka every single day. And I saw that even if he was traveling, teaching, very busy, not well, sick in Colombo, he would always find time in his schedule. Every single day he would chant it.
He went and chanted for 14 hours, I think. The suttas that some child in Burma, when he was sick.
Probably for Park Sayadaw, they chanted suttas. Of course, he is exceptional in the number of suttas he knows by heart. No, but you can start simple by learning to chant it along, listening and chanting with the sutta every day or once a week. Or if you want to push more, then you can just learn it by heart. I think during the Vassa, learning something like the Dhammacakka, I think is quite reasonable in 3 months. If you know the Dhammacakka already, the next formal discourse is the Anatta Lakkhana, discourse on the non-self characteristic. After the teaching of the Dhammacakka, setting in motion the wheel of Dhamma, first only Venerable Anya Kondanya attained stream entry. And then the Buddha started coaching and teaching all these 5. And when their mind was ready, the mind of all 5, then in the same rains retreat, he taught the Anatta Lakkhana about non-self. And that is when all 5 of them became Arahants. So it's a great sutta, and Ajahn Dhammasiha will recite that at our next full moon program on Sunday, closest to the next full moon, which is probably when that happened, in that first Vassa. If you already know that one as well, you can do the Aditta Pariyaya Sutta, known as the 3rd famous formal discourse. And that was after the rains retreat, when the Buddha succeeded in converting the 1,000 fire-worshipping Brahman ascetics. That is the highest number reported of a simultaneous attainment of full Nibbana, of Arahantship. But they had lots of faith. The Buddha was doing a whole string of miracles of psychic power, and from that they gained tremendous faith in him. And in the end, on Gaya Sisa, you can still go there on pilgrimage. It's a hill, rocky hill next to Gaya. 20 kilometers north of Bodh Gaya or something. And then 1,000 of these Brahman ascetics actually became Arahants and then ordained. Highest number of persons attaining at the same time by listening to one discourse. So that's actually one of my favorites. Well, that's a great one to learn. Now, do you know the morning chanting, evening chanting? If you don't know the morning chanting, then we do that every Saturday morning, 7:30. But it's also on the podcast. Now, if you put in Dhammagiri, I think morning chanting, that should come up. Saturday afternoon we do not the full evening chanting. We wouldn't have quite enough time to do the full chanting, but major parts of it. Now that is maybe even the best ones to start. What we do here Saturday afternoon. It's good to know something by heart in Pali and something also in English. Do you all have a Buddha statue, a little shrine in your home? If anyone doesn't, that is the first thing actually to start. Now, having a Buddha in your home, I would really recommend that. Doesn't have to be in a peak like this or even bigger. Doesn't have to be in some super antique piece of art, no, but having a Buddha statue, if you want to practice, I think is always good and beneficial. And if you have one, do you bow at least once a day, 3 times? That's a kind of real duty. I mean, the traditional style is not to do morning puja, evening puja, maybe even at noon, and making offerings and everything. No, but now in our times, modern times, no, people may not be able to do that, no, but at least have a Buddha bow 3 times and make a little offering, no, just 1 flower, that's 1 incense, 2 tea lights, something very simple. Once a day, and it gives you a good break. How often do the Muslims have to pray? 5 times. 6 times? 5 times a day, ne? So I mean, once paying respect to the Buddha, ne, should be possible. And
my friend actually does it at work. He goes something. He found a very small room, and he does it.
a Muslim friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's not, worried about people around him. He just does it.
Exactly. No? So please don't be worried about bowing to the Supreme Being in the universe. And if they have to do that regularly 5 times, and then at that time whatever happens is interrupted, it's quite a good practice of mindfulness. We get so involved with worldly matters, and then if you bow and do that, you get pushed out of the worldly stuff. Yeah.
But is it wrong to have the Buddha statue in a bedroom? Because we have to do that.
In my mind, exactly the location. I think the most important is to have one. The ideal location is usually in having your own shrine room. If you can do that, and here in Australia, and coming from Germany originally, I'm always amazed, and it's quite common in Germany that people just have in a flat, an apartment. And my parents with 2 kids, and we had a 4-bedroom apartment that was pretty good already. But when I see the houses and the size, what they have usually in Australia, ideally, if you can reserve 1 room for that, because that will build the strongest atmosphere. If you can't afford having a dedicated room, then have a dedicated corner somewhere, and a little bit out of sight of other activities. That the Buddha is not overlooking anything inappropriate, so to speak. What we kind of pretend a little bit, it's like the Buddha is there. This is why we are bowing. Now the idea gives you a little bit the feeling as if the Buddha is there. This is why when you come in, you bow. You play, you act a little bit like as if it is the Buddha. And that also then arouses a sense of hiri, ottappa, a sense of shame. And if you have the Buddha kind of looking at you, you want to act at least within the 5 precepts as a minimum. What I often notice if you go into many homes, it's usually the screen which is in the dominant spot. Because usually you want to put the Buddha in a dominant spot. But most likely in your home, that is where you have got the big TV. That's often the dominant one.
When I was growing up, we always had a shrine room, separate shrine room. So when I'm upset or something, I'll always go sit there and just talk to Buddha.
That is the idea. Now you will find if you practice regularly, whether it's a meditation or even just doing the chanting, puja, an offering, you create a certain energy in that space. Now I can't explain how it works exactly. But we all know that certain locations have a certain vibe, a certain energy. And if you can keep other activities out of that one room, or at least out of that corner. If it's not a room, then have a corner where you don't do anything else. And then you will notice whenever you go there, you already pick up that energy, and it's much easier to settle down and to calm down. You can further support that by having the Dhamma activity at the same time. If you manage to do your pūjā, your meditation, in that location and at the same time, you will also notice that your mind inclines towards meditation at that time in the day. It becomes habitual. It's very supportive. But as lay life is very busy, the best opportunity is probably the morning. Although admittedly, I'm not a early bird kind of person myself, so I acknowledge it's not for everyone. Some people just are not alert in the morning, in which case you may want to do it in the evening. But if you can manage to be alert in the morning, that's often the best time. It's the easiest one to have it regularly in the same spot, same time. And your mind ideally is already refreshed from resting overnight. So if you want to start something in the Vassa, and make sure at least you have a Buddha statue, shrine in a good location, and then a little bit of paying respects, pūjā, chanting, starting with once a day if you just get going. And once you do the pūjā, you can just sit in just a few minutes, quietly letting it reverberate. If you're not really into meditation yet, the chanting and bowing and offering something may work easier. But then I suggest after that you just sit down and sit quietly for a while, and this whole chanting will kind of reverberate. And in this way, then you start getting used to quietly sitting and meditating, and then you can start expanding. Chanting is also great to give you this transition, because our speed and modern life is just so crazy, and the stress levels and the deadlines is all crazy. And it's like going a car with 200 kilometer an hour, like on the German Autobahn, where there's no speed limit. People are lacking the speed limit in their life. When you're driving a car, you have got a very kind institution which is fully dedicated on helping you keeping the speed limit. A police force. You can be grateful when they radar you and stop you and issue you little fines when you're speeding. A very kind service, trying to slow you down. But with your mind, there's no one who could do that for you. And you have to do it yourself. But most people now are rushing along with 200 km an hour. And if you come home like that, and just still on that kind of speed, and then you try to sit down and do anapanasati, the mind may just rebel, maybe just too fast. But if you go to your little corner at that time and your mind already has the habit of quietening down, and then you start with bowing, doing a little bit of pūjā, doing some chanting, that is like slowing down, taking the foot off the gas pedal, and gradually slowing down. And after 20 minutes in the pūjā, chanting, then the mind may be able to actually calm down and do more refined samatha practice. That's one reason why we are also starting our Sunday afternoon session first with the chanting, putting the mind in the right frame, and then the more refined activity of completely silent meditation, it can be easier.